Hi everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to recommend some fantasy books that I think are perfect to read in summer. Now of course, when you think about summer, you immediately think about the weather. It's very warm, it's very nice outside, and that is why the majority of books that I have here on the list take place in a warmer climate. Some of them are desert-based, others take place on islands, so think about those types of fantasy books. But somehow I also think about summer as the season of extremes. Often we have multiple heat waves in a row, and then in between we have storms because the heat has been building up and all of a sudden it starts exploding. So I think about family drama as well, and drama in general, when I think about summer. So I do have some tragedies on the list as well, and just drama. And maybe part of it is also because when I had summer break when I was younger, I used to watch telenovelas with my mother during noon, and I think that, well, telenovelas are just peak drama, so maybe that's also why I just associate summer with drama. But anyway, you are getting all of the summery vibes in the next recommendations. So without further ado, let's just get into them. And the first batch of recommendations that I have are myth retellings. Now, myths in general are often very tragic, and myth retellings by default are thus also filled with drama. Now I'm not going to show you a lot of them because I actually have a separate myth retellings recommendations video, but the two that I think definitely fit the bill are first of all Kaikai by Vaishnavi Patel and Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. So Kaikai is an Indian myth retelling, so the setting is also very summery, but this feels like a tragedy. And I will not tell you whether or not it ends in tragedy, but while I was reading it, I all of a sudden and almost constantly had a feeling of dread, like this is not going to end well. In this one, we follow Kaikai, who was a vilified queen in the Ramayana, and we follow her journey, her life, from when she is a very young girl to when she's grown up and when she has to marry a prince, or a king I should say, and have his children. I really love this. I think that this is one of the most fantasy-esque myth retellings that I have read, with a lot of magic as well, so I highly recommend this one, and especially if you want to read a little bit about family drama. And then this one, Ariadne, is a Greek myth retelling, and if you know the story about Ariadne, you have a feeling about how this is going to end. Ariadne was was the sister of the Minotaur, and something happens and she gets stranded on an island alone. So the setting, perfect summer, but there's also some drama, there is some romance here. There are definitely issues. So this was one that I highly recommend and that I really enjoyed reading in general as well. Plus, Jennifer Saint actually has come out with another myth retelling, Electra, that I haven't read yet, but I have heard great things about. And if you want to know more about some other myth retellings, I do have that separate video as well. Next up, I want to talk about some fantasy books that take place at sea. So ships, pirates, captains, all of that. It feels like it's a very adventurous setting, and because of that, it's perfect for summer. The first book that I have here, it's one that I recently read and really adored, and that is The Bone-Short Daughter by Andrea Stewart. This is the first book in the Drowning Empire trilogy, and the conclusion of that trilogy is coming out in 2023. Now this actually has it all. I have a full spoiler-free review for this one if you want to know more, but I think that this is perfect for summer because it has an extremely tropical setting. The empire, where the story takes place, is actually a collection of floating islands in the sea, and it just feels very warm and very pleasant to be. Now, the other reason is that one of the POVs is actually a pirate who, together with his animal companion, is trying to find back his missing wife. So there's a lot of mystery. Actually, all of the POVs have something mysterious going on that you're trying to unravel while reading the book. It's very fast-paced, there are a lot of twists and turns, so just in general, perfect to pick up in summer. And of course, when we are talking about naval fantasy, there is just one book, one series that I cannot ignore, the Queen of Fantasy, Robin Hobb, and of course her Life Ship Traders trilogy. This is the first book, Ship of Magic, and I of course do need to mention that this is actually the second trilogy in her Realm of the Elderlings series, and the first trilogy, Farseer, is actually the one that you should start with, especially if you want to read the optimal condition. But because the Farseer trilogy and the Life Ship Traders trilogy take place at different parts of this world, you wouldn't exactly get spoiled if you read one before the other. So you can definitely start with this one, you will not be missing any important information, but I would recommend trying Farseer first. However, if you have tried Farseer and you didn't like it, or if you just don't find the story appealing and you don't want to read that one, definitely still give this one a try. It feels very different. In this one, first of all, we follow a life ship traders family. Now, life ships are ships who come alive after 3 generations, 3 captains have died on deck. Now, there's a lot of drama in this family, and this is just already a reason why it feels perfect to read in summer. But another POV is actually a pirate whose sole mission in life is to acquire one of these life ships. So things are going to happen, of course. It has a lot of politicking, but most of all, it just has this drama. And there's also a little bit of a mystery going on with sea snakes. So definitely one that I would recommend as well. And then another fantasy book with a sea setting, and that is Dark Seas End by Richard Nell. Now, this is not getting enough praise on BookTube, and I do hope that more people will pick this one up because it's just amazing. This is the first book in the Beyond Ash and Sand trilogy, and of course, that does mean that there is an Ash and Sand trilogy, so an original trilogy. Now, the author has stated that you can definitely read this one without having read the previous one. You will get all of the information in this one, but the events are chronological. So this story takes place after the story of the Ash and Sand trilogy, and I would still recommend reading the Ash and Sand trilogy first, which is just amazing, but it is grimdark. Now, there we have two POVs, two main POVs. One of the POVs lives in a very harsh climate where it's extremely cold, and that is actually why this made my winter recommendations list. But the other POV has a more Persian setting almost. It feels like the setting in The Bone Shark Daughter, actually. It's very tropical, so you could perfectly also read that trilogy in summer. But if you don't like grimdark, this is not as dark, and I think that people who don't like grimdark would also really appreciate this. This story actually takes place in that more tropical setting of the original Ash and Sand trilogy, and we follow a pirate who goes on a mission with his ship to explore the unknown world. So very adventurous, very perfect for summer. Now, the last category that I have here is also the biggest one, and that is just in general fantasy books with a summery vibe. Either because they are desert based, they are tropical based, because they have a lot of political intrigue, a lot of drama, a lot of things going on, which I just think is perfect for summer. The first one that I have here is a series that doesn't really get enough praise on BookTube, in my opinion. And that is The Song of the Shattered Sands by Bradley P. Bolio. This is the first book, 12 Kings, and in this one we meet Cheda. Cheda lives in the city of Charakai, which is a desert city, and that is being ruled by 12 immortal kings. These kings have been given their power by the gods, and gods in fantasy, by the way, just screams summer for me as well. But these 12 immortal kings have killed Cheda's mother. Cheda doesn't know why, but she does know that something has been going on, and she is on a mission to find out what exactly, and while she's at it, also kill these 12 immortal kings because she needs her revenge. In this first book, there's a lot of setup, but in the second and third one, there's also a lot of political intrigue. You get to know more about these kings, you get to unravel the mystery alongside Cheda through these poems, and I think that this is just in general a really amazing series. I definitely need to continue with this one, but highly recommend. Next up, I just have a straight up desert-based standalone, so not a lot of commitment needed. Maybe that's also perfect for you in summer if you don't really have a lot of time. That is Raise the Sands by Sarah Beth Durst. Now, I have read two books by Sarah Beth Durst, this one and The Bone Maker, and I think that this is definitely the best one out of those two. I highly recommend this one, especially if you need just a quick fantasy book, you want to have a quick refill of your fantasy, and you don't really need a lot of brain power to get through this one. Just perfect for that. And I also have a complete spoiler-free review for this one as well, by the way. Now, in this one we have Keyhawks. These are these monsters that you can see here on the cover, and these have been reincarnated from horrible people. So these are not treated that well, but there are these Keyhawk races, Raise the Sands. And if you win one of these races, you get a lot of money. Now, in this book we have two main POVs. The first one is a trainer of these Keyhawks, and she needs money very fast to support her daughter. The other POV is a young girl who has run away from home because she was going to get married off to an abusive husband. So both of these people meet, they need money, they have a Keyhawk to race. I'm sure you can guess where this is going. Now, we also have another POV, and that's actually in the palace. And why that is important, you will definitely realize when you continue reading this story, but definitely one that I would highly recommend as well. Now, I also have a recommendation for my grimdark fans, and that is The Chronicle of the Unhung Throne trilogy by Brian Staley. Now, I actually have a full spoiler-free review for this series if you want to know more, and I do know that this series has not been getting a lot of love on BookTube lately, but it is still on my top 10 fantasy series of all time list, so I would highly recommend this one. At the start of the story, the emperor gets murdered, and we follow his 3 children who are scattered along the empire. We follow the heir to the throne, who is studying to become a priest, and he doesn't really know why this is important. We follow the daughter, who is trained to become a skilled politician, and we follow his other son, who is in the secret military somehow, and is trained to become a killer. Now, all 3 of these are not really ready for the task at hand. We know that there is also a lot of interference of the gods here. There's a lot of lore, a lot of myth, a lot of mystery, and just in general, I absolutely loved it. Also, by the way, if you loved Bloodsong and Valen here, which is strangely enough, he has the same name, reminded me of Valen. So this school where he is to become this military man is very similar to the military school that we have in Bloodsong, and I really enjoyed that as well. So highly recommend this one, even though not everybody on BookTube loves this series. Now, maybe you do have a lot of time in summer. Maybe you've taken some days or weeks off even, and you want to sink your teeth into a very big fantasy series. Now, then Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson is perfect. This is of course the first book in the Stormlight Archive series, and I think that this is perfect for summer, first of all because it has a hard magic system, which somehow I also connect to summer, but also and most of all because of the world building. As you can see here, you have the Shattered Plains. These scream summer. Of course, they have these high storms in between, so it's very hot, and then they have a storm. That's summer in a nutshell, to be honest. But you also have other places in this world, and the world building here is really exquisite. You have places in the world where there's not a lot of water, of course, and the animals look different because of that. And I really appreciated that. So if this is something that sounds interesting, if you have the time to read a 1000-page book, definitely pick this one up. And then one that I will very shortly mention because it's not fantasy and because most people have heard of this one, Dune by Frank Herbert, of course, because this takes place in the planet of Arrakis, where there is not a lot of water. It's basically one big desert. Pick it up. I read it in summer last year. I actually have a spoiler-free reading vlog for that I will link in the description box down below. And I thought that it was the perfect experience. So this is one that I would also highly recommend to pick up. Next up, I have a book that has a lot of drama, a lot of mystery, and it has the perfect setting. And that is The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. This is the first book in the Rook and Rose trilogy, which takes place in a Venetian-inspired city. So, of course, perfect for the season. In this one, we follow a con artist who is trying to lie her way into a very rich family, or at least that's what she's thinking, because this family is actually having some money problems, and of course, drama ensues. Now, if this isn't enough to sell you, we also have a Zorro-type character called the Rook. There's a lot of mystery around his identity, and we're trying to figure that out throughout this book. So one that I would highly recommend as well. Next up, I have a series that if you really want to sink your teeth into a big and dense series with a lot of political intrigue and you have a couple of weeks off in summer, this would be perfect. And that is The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. This is the first book, The Grace of Kings, and here we actually have the reimagining of the birth of the Han Dynasty in China. So this is very similar to those events. If you know what happens during those events, you're actually spoiled for the events of this book, but there's also interference of the gods. And like I said before, I think that's perfect for books to read in summer. So one that I would also highly recommend, at least if you have some time off, because otherwise it might not be so smart to start this series. Next up, I wanted to recommend a colonial-inspired fantasy, and that is The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. This is the first book in the Magic of the Lost series, and of course this has a more heavy topic, but I really enjoyed this first book and I cannot wait for the second one to come out. In this one we have two main POVs. The first one is the POV of the crown princess of the empire, who is going to one of the colonies because an uprising is happening there. The other POV is of a soldier of the empire who is also going to that colony, trying to contain that uprising or that rebellion. Now, the interesting thing here is that this soldier was originally from that colony, but as a child she was abducted by the empire and raised as a child soldier. So of course this leads to some conflicting emotions. She doesn't really know what to do with the situation. And we see her and the crown princess also having some sort of a relationship, so definitely a lot of drama there as well. I really enjoyed this one. I think that even though this is a more hard-hitting topic, this is definitely a book that I think most people would enjoy and would really need to read, actually. And I think that this is a very unique way of retelling this story. So one that I would highly recommend as well. So these are all of the books that I wanted to recommend to you to read in summer. I definitely hope that there is something here for everybody and that you know what to pick up next. Now, if this is not enough, for whatever reason, I do have that myth recommendations video that I will put here. I also have some Norse myths that I talk about there, but a lot of Greek myths and other myths that take place in a warmer climate as well. As always, I hope that you enjoyed this video and see you next time. Bye!